Hello and welcome. Today we're going to talk about social engineering and the social construct that is Christianity. And I am going to single out Christianity, even though Islam and Judaism are all just social constructs as well. I'm going to single out Christianity because it is the world's biggest religion, pseudo belief system, and it's prevalent in America, and they are doing a lot of things right now. So I've taken some notes because I want to make sure I cover the points, the topics that I want to hit on here. So let's get right into it. Now, we all know that history, as we know it, is written by the victors. There's no way around that. A country defeats another country, a people defeats another people, and they give their version of that historical occurrence, that historical event. That sanctioned version is social engineering. They erase the past. That culture that they took over, that they conquered, is now hidden. You can find it, but you have to dig for it. But that is how history works. Sanctioned versions written by victors. To the point where you have people since the mid 1940s, you have one ruler of a country who's been called Satan on earth since those mid 40s up to present day. And while Christianity is now shifting their focus from a very pro-Israel stance to a Israel and the people who inhabit Israel are evil. They are not reflective of their Old Testament. So we have a pot here because I've heard some Christian vloggers, just vloggers in general, say that Christianity is growing and that more people are shifting from that Zionist born again perspective into a fulfillment theology where the New Testament replaces the Old Testament, if you will. So this is a pot, fittingly the garbage can that is Christianity. So in this pot, let's say this whole pot is Christianity in its entirety. If we divide that pot right here, boom, this side will be Catholicism, this side will be Zionism. Okay, as more people realize the depravity that is Abraham and that Israel is, and they'll acknowledge that, but they won't think about any of the 1940s stuff. Okay, so as this grows and more people lead from this side to this side, okay, and this grows. Now this side thinks here, the Catholicism side thinks, well, Christianity is growing. No, you have to say pot. It's just things are shifting. This side is becoming smaller because more people are coming over here because they don't agree with what Israel has been doing. So, and they're denouncing Israel, saying with their fulfillment theology that Israel is no more, doesn't need to be, that pretty much God is through with the Jew. So if anyone out there has data that shows that Christianity is growing, please share it in the comments, because from my perspective and in my opinion, from what I have seen, Christianity is not growing. Actually, it is definitely shrinking. So some of the things that these vloggers, Christian and otherwise, are saying about Israel, and this is why they're saying they're other than killing children and that are in Palestine and things like this, and just being evil and setting up a state that shouldn't be there. Some of this will sound familiar because it's been said in the past that the people of Israel are poisoning the water of the Palestinians. I've heard that before. And they're actually saying that Monsanto chemicals are being sent to Israel for that purpose. So that's very interesting. Also, there is in place, this is what they're saying, and I concur with this part here too, that there is a shadow government in the United States of America. And it's not a current thing. It's not just all of a sudden, boom, Trump's in office, there's a shadow government. No, there's been a shadow government for decades upon decades, maybe even centuries. So there's a shadow government, and the shadow government is the controller of the puppet strings. And that shadow government is Israel. So I had a conversation with a friend of mine, and we agree on a lot of points, socially, politically. Where we disagree immensely is with religion. He's a Christian. And he called a few days ago. He said, Donald Trump is the Antichrist. He is Satan on earth. Oh, okay. We have a replacement, but for the 1940s Satan on earth. But I don't think that title will ever truly be taken away because people are too afraid to research that portion of history. Remember, history, sanctioned versions. So I told him, I said, so your God placed Satan on earth in charge of the most powerful military country in the world right now. And he said, no, Satan did. I said, no, that can't be. Satan does not do anything with God's approval. He goes, no, Satan did. And so I told him to read Job. In his own Bible, in the Old Testament Job, where Satan destroys Job. Well, before Satan could do anything, he had to go get permission from that God of the Bible. He had to say, God, I want to do this to Job. And God would say, yeah, that's okay. You go right ahead and do it. And it was evil stuff. And so without that approval from their God, their Satan can't do anything evil. So if my buddy wants to say, well, that, Satan's in charge of earth, that's because God commanded it. Your God commands this evil. There's no way around that. The God of the Bible is evil. He's chaotic. He, it, she, whatever it is. It's pretty muddy. So gaslighting. What is gaslighting? Gaslighting and indoctrination. I view those, while they could apply to more than one person, they could apply to multiple people if it's used properly. I more look at gaslighting as a one-on-one thing, gaslighting and propaganda, or not indoctrination. I look at that more as a one-on-one issue, like in a domestic relationship where there's violence taking place. The abuser will gaslight the victim that the abuse happened because they did wrong, that they would fail without them, that they deserved that. This is kind of, it programs the mind on a one-on-one basis, whereas the abuser then is reliant upon, the victim is then reliant upon the abuser and feels as though if they leave, if they ever escape that enslavement, that entrapment, that they will fail. They will not be able to succeed. They are dependent upon their abuser, and they will gladly endure the torment for that. That is the Bible. That differs from social engineering in a social construct. And social construct with all of the social engineering leads to slavery. There are three. According to Sir William Blackstone of the 18th century, he was a jurist, a politician, a judge, and he had three elements of slavery. There are three different types of slavery. So let me get them up on the screen here. Let me remove that. And there we go. The three types of slavery is political slavery, civil slavery, and domestic slavery. So I'll just read these real quick to you here. Political slavery. 1, when a nation is, from any external cause, deprived of the right of being governed by its own laws. Only such a nation may be considered in a state of political slavery. Such is the state of conquered countries and generally of colonies and other dependent governments. Such was the state of United America before the Revolution. In this case, the personal rights of the subject may be so far secured by wholesome laws as that the individual may be esteemed free, whilst the state is subject to a higher power. This subjection of one nation or people to the will of another constitutes the first species of slavery, which, in order to distinguish it from the other two, I have called political, inasmuch as it exists only in respect to the governments and not the individual of the two countries. Of this, it is not our business at present. So, at present, while Blackstone says it does not affect the individual, it only affects the government when one country is in charge of another country, which is kind of what these other vloggers are saying about Israel, that they are the shadow government. America's in a political slavery to Israel. Our heathen ancestors were in political slavery to Christianity when these Christian nations would come in and tell the king, you either convert or we won't trade with you. So the king would do it. So that's a political slavery. Now they control your laws. They control your money. So let's go into civil slavery now. Civil slavery. Civil liberty, according to Judge Blackstone, being no other than natural liberty so far restrained by human laws and no farther as is necessary and expedient for the general advantage of the public, whenever that liberty is, by the laws of the state, further restrained than is necessary and expedient for the general advantage, a state of civil slavery commences immediately. This may affect the whole society and every description of persons in it, and yet the constitution of the state may be perfectly free. And this happens whenever the laws of state respect to the form or energy of the government more than the happiness of the citizens. As in Venice, where the most oppressive species of civil slavery exists, extending to every individual in the state, from the poorest gondolier to the members of the Senate and the Doge himself. Now, obviously, this is time sensitive, and when they're talking about Venice. So, civil slavery, when the weight of laws becomes so oppressive, that right now, the United States of America, maybe other countries out there too, I'd love to hear from you. I would love to hear from you about your condition of civil slavery as compared to what Blackstone just said, because the United States is 100% in a state of civil slavery. The laws are oppressive, and these laws have resulted in overcrowding of prisons. We have people in prisons for life sentences off of social constructs. So let's look at the third form of slavery, according to Sir William Blackstone of the 18th century. The last form is domestic slavery. We're all familiar with that. That condition in which one man is subject to be directed by another in all his actions, and this constitutes a state of domestic slavery, to which state all the incapacities and disabilities of civil slavery are incident, with the weight of other numerous calamities superadded thereto. And here it may be proper to make a short inquiry into the origin and foundation of domestic slavery in other countries previous to its fatal introduction into this country here, the United States of America. So what inquiry could be made into that? What inquiry could be made into Blackstone's domestic slavery? Because our ancestors were enslaved. Our ancestors, not only civilly, not only politically and civilly, but they were enslaved domestically. And if you look at just the Inquisition time frame, how many people were put into prisons and dungeons? Now, that was assigned to people who did what? Said, well, the Bible is not true. Look at this. The earth is not flat. Okay. It's not geocentric. The universe is not geocentric. These people were imprisoned. They were imprisoned. So those are the forms of slavery according to Blackstone. And I'm going to move on, because before the body can be enslaved, the mind must. As soon as your mind is free, then your body responds accordingly. This is applicable to everything. If you're trying to work out and gain muscle mass, you have to picture yourself. You can't picture yourself as what you are losing. You have to picture yourself as what you are becoming. So what is a social construct? Let's get right into the social construct of everything, which will then lead to social engineering. Time is a social construct. When we look at the work week, Monday through Friday are generally considered the work week. And then you have the weekend. We're in the weekend right now. Those are constructs. The tick of a clock, the turn of a calendar page, that's a social construct. That is something that we believe is factual right now, but it's actually implemented as a device. And if we think about the work week and the work hours and the holidays that are in place, the tick of a clock, I've used this so many of my videos, the tick of a clock, the turn of a calendar page, and what does nature abide by? There are seasons to our pagan celebrations. Nature abides by the change of seasons, the changes of weather. So what has to be superimposed on top of that is a social construct. Daylight savings time, another one. Think about how you relate to daylight savings time and nature does. If there are 12 hours of daylight in a day, nature is just like, we have this much daylight. However, humans shift their time on the scale. It's a social construct. And you know what else is a social construct? Crime. That results in civil slavery. So I'm going to read some things out of a book here. And this book is American Criminal Courts by Welch and Fuller. It's a 2014 edition. So the first thing I want to read is just a little excerpt from chapter 2, which is right here. And we're going to remove that one completely. I got to add some pictures in there a little bit later. So, public policy and social engineering. The increasing bureaucratization and professionalization of courts has not been neutral. It has actually led to an increase in state power that is so important, because that is what social engineering does. That's its sole purpose, is to increase the power of the state. Now, when I say the state, I don't just mean the divided border lines within the United States of America or any other country. I mean state, the government. Whether that's the national government, the state government, doesn't matter. Its purpose is to increase state power. The nation has not lost law as the cornerstone of its justice system. But with bureaucracies and professional organizations, the state can much more effectively use public policy to achieve goals of social engineering, which is an international effort by the government to change a population's beliefs, attitudes, and behavioral patterns. Social engineering is not peculiar to modern governments. No, it's not. Hello, Christianity in the days of our pagan ancestors. Since the days of early societies, governments have tried to persuade or force the masses to revere the rulers. Yes, that Christianity had its chosen kings as long as that king supported the church. But modern social engineering efforts are more precise and pervasive. One recent example of social engineering has been the government's successful campaign to persuade most Americans to condemn or even fear particular drugs such as marijuana or crack cocaine, while accepting others such as alcohol, caffeine, and prescription painkillers. I want to just make a note here. I highlighted these things just so I could draw your eyes and your mind to the laws of social construct and what has put masses of people into prison. There are different prison sentences for crack cocaine and powder cocaine. I don't know if you're aware of that, but they carry, even though they're the same, pretty much have the same effect and they're the same product or byproduct, there are different prison sentences that target different elements of society. I'm not condoning drug use. Or any of the other. I'm just using these highlighted these to draw your mind to these areas. Okay. So another example is the increase in the rate of drivers and passengers wearing seatbelts. This was the result of a gradual campaign, first in the 1980s, encouraging seatbelt wearing, then ticketing drivers pulled over for another offense for not wearing their seatbelts. And finally, today, proactively pulling over drivers if anyone in the car is not wearing a seatbelt. Nationally, over 75% of drivers wear a seatbelt on a regular basis, but in the absence of seatbelt laws, under 20% of the drivers wore them. In these examples, we see that government used bureaucracies to enforce their policies and achieve social engineering goals. Courts are one of these bureaucracies. So, there we see social engineering, and it creates a social construct. It creates the mindset construct. Think of social. Let me pause there. Think of social construct as constructing the mind of society to believe in a set of social norms. Okay, that's what social construct is. So let's move on to another section. I want to read just this quick little blurb here. This is in chapter 1. The other one was in chapter 2. And we're going to go right here. In addition to the crime control policies of arrest, punishment, and rehabilitation, the government utilizes propaganda techniques to shift public attitudes. Social engineering or government efforts to change the beliefs, attitudes, and behavioral patterns of a section of the population uses media, speeches, and public outreach programs to deter people by warning them of the consequences of crime, to persuade people to condemn or fear certain activities such as drug use or denouncing Christianity, saying Jesus fake, Bible is fraud, and to convince them to support government policies, such as the expansion of privatization of prisons. In each case, the government is casting its net of social control over more people. So, I had a discussion in one of my classes. It was a criminal law class. And it was about victimless crimes. And one of the areas of many was prostitution. And had a discussion, and I'll just read you my reply. My reply was to this other student, and in the category prostitution. You stated morality is the basis for victimless crimes after citing a source calling prostitution immoral conduct. Now, I just want to stop right there for a second because a lot of Christians, no matter where in the trash can pot they lie, a lot of Christians will say, and they do believe, that they get their morality from the Bible. And I will talk about that a little bit more. So, but I want to continue here. Do you believe then extramarital affairs are immoral conduct and a sign of America run amok? What about hookups, one-night flings, friends with benefits, and premarital sex? Do you believe those areas are also areas that could result in STDs, potential for abuse, unsafe environments, and involvement of minors? Should they be labeled immoral and made illegal? Returning to what you said in your preamble, the world would be very chaotic if people were allowed to do whatever they want. Do you believe that if something were made legal, that once it was legal, people would want to engage in that conduct merely because it was not legal? If prostitution were made legal, would people who never had a desire to engage in prostitution suddenly do so? To that point, from 1907 until 2024, New York State had a statute declaring adultery as a crime. In 2004, Governor Kathy Hochul signed a bill that repealed that crime. Do you believe she was wrong in making adultery legal, thus declaring it to be moral conduct because it's no longer illegal, so therefore it must be moral, right? According to this other student. Also, now that it is legal, do you believe that more New Yorkers will have extramarital affairs? And if we look at Europe, prostitution is legal, hence moral in many countries. Not only is it legal in countries that mandate both spouses be employed, but prostitution is one of the jobs the government will mandate if a person says they cannot find a job. Do you feel those Christian countries are immoral while America embraces moral free love? Morality cannot be legislated. And I asked her what her thoughts are on that. So, premarital sex, I brought it up right there. I want to talk about that for a second because I've had conversations with Christians and pastors even, and that they are now married. And I say to them, Adam and Eve were not married then because they didn't have that paper from man. See, the paper from man, a social construct. And they believe in it so much because they've been socially engineered en masse. Because Adam went into Eve and she was his wife. When? Not when they went and got a piece of paper from a priest or a pastor, but when he went into her, which means all these people who are Christians who say they believe in the Bible and they get their morals from the Bible. Well, guess what? The first person that you boinked, that is your spouse, according to your God of the Bible. And Adam and Eve. It is what it is. It's right there. So, religion in history. The forced conversions of our pagan ancestors. The victors wrote the histories of those conversions. They wrote the histories of our people, of our ancestors. They mandated sanctioned versions that they created, even though they were all based on lies, or they all were lies. So, Plato, his allegory of the cave, in that allegory of the cave, and I've heard this said by vloggers that they're applying it to Donald Trump with the people he has surrounding him right now. And when I listen to them, I think, for crying out loud, apply it to yourself. Apply it to your belief system. Apply it to your mantra that Christ is king or whatever. Apply it to yourself, because the Plato's allegory of the cave is that there is a group of prisoners. They're all chained and facing the inside of a cave and facing a cave wall. And that's all they can see is the cave wall. And there is a fire that burns behind them. And every now and then, a person will put an object in front of the fire and dance it across, and it will, that shadow will appear on the cave wall. Well, they've been chained there since birth. And that's all they have seen are these shadows. So since birth, now all the way up to adulthood, these shadows are their reality. Well, in the allegory, one of the prisoners escapes, leaves the cave, and sees the outside world. Wow. Comes back and tells the other prisoners, the other captives who are enslaved, their mind is looking at the shadows saying that is reality. And the person that returns and tries to say, no, you're looking at shadows, a pseudo reality. The reality is out there. This is what I saw. You know what they do? They deny his story. They laugh at him. They ridicule him because they're looking at reality, not him. So that is the enslaved mind from birth, the Christian tied up in the cave, watching shadows on the wall. Plato's allegory of the cave. So this is Christianity. And look at the picture. The body goes into these buildings of religious indoctrination, and their mind is inside of a cage that can only comprehend within that cage. Now, I'm not saying these people are stupid. And so please do not make that mistake. I'm not saying that these people are stupid, because in some areas they're very smart. In some areas they have wisdom, but they don't get that wisdom from any pseudo God of Abraham. But when it comes to looking through the lens that they're using as applied to their own belief, boom, cage, immediately. So these Christian laws that were imposed, remember, government power. And when Christianity took over, the government got their power from the church. And once they appointed that leader, then the leader then supported the church. That's why you had so many wars going on within Christian nations, because of different leaders and which ones were appointed and which ones were not, and which faction of the religion. Okay. These edicts were laws that were solely meant for their own empowerment to enslave people. And our ancestors, the thinking outside that cage, even if they could not state it. Otherwise, they were subjected to what? Domestic slavery. So what do you usually get from responses from Christians? Well, the responses that you get is, first, that they have to check their brain at the door. Whenever they go into those religious buildings, they really, truly have to leave their brain behind. Because if you think critically, if you allow yourself to be a free thinker, then you're going to realize that's all bunk. So, and I've had some of these people leave comments on my video. As a matter of fact, some time ago, I got into a conversation in the comment section with a Christian, and I debunked him every single step. And this was a lengthy conversation under his thread that once I shut him down and he had nowhere else to run, no other verses to henpeck, he deleted the whole thread. That's just, well, it is what it is. But they'll say, I've had recently, I need to talk to Jesus. Or they'll henpeck a Bible verse and throw it into the comments. The Bible is a fraud and Jesus is a fake. These are comments. These are real comments. Real people that are enslaved. Their mind was checked at the door. So what do they have to do to get to that point? They have to ignore reality. They have to ignore facts. And They have to ignore discussions. They have to just walk away. They can't, if you're involved in a discussion and you're going to throw the Bible at me, then I'm going to say, one, I don't believe in that garbage, okay? But also, I am therefore entitled to throw that same Bible back at you. Just because you don't like what I know doesn't mean I'm wrong. As a matter of fact, your Bible, because I'm quoting it, says it's 100% true, according to you. So they regurgitate this programming that they got. Well, initially they got it from those forced conversions, and now they're getting it from the man at the altar. But think about that, the man at the altar. The man at the altar. They don't believe it, because you look at all the pedophilia and the sex trafficking and the adultery and the crimes that they're wrapped up in. If they believe this, they would never, ever do that, because it's evil. It's Satan, for crying out loud. But they do it. So the Christian, the laity, the person in the pew has got to ignore that. They have to say, well, that person was backsliding. Let's pray for them to return to Jesus. Okay. And I've also been in conversations where, and these ones are good ones. They say, how can you deny that God is real? Just look around you and you'll see that God is real. And I say, okay, let's look around us. And what do we see? We see in nature that a seed will fall from a tree into the ground. The masculine seed enters the feminine ground, and the feminine creates. We look at the animal kingdom. The masculine provides the seed to the feminine creates. We look at humanity. The male provides the seed to woman, and the feminine creates. Your Bible says the masculine creates, which is contrary to everything when I look around. You know what they say? All things are possible with God. That's their answer. All things are possible with God. It's mental gymnastics. Instead of dealing with reality and what they actually see, they have to say all things are possible with God, because they are socially engineered to say that. They are enslaved to believe the lie. Slaves of their own mind. Now, I mentioned critical thinking because we have to be critical thinkers on all levels. And Christianity just cannot do that. And they're not critical thinkers, especially in regard to their own religion, but they're not free thinkers. And they can't think and see outside of that box that they have created for themselves. Zombies walking around, just repeating. What was that? The movie, The Mummy. It reminds me of that, The Mummy. I'll probably mispronounce what they were saying, but remember in that one part where everybody was in mind control and they were walking around, that's what it reminds me of. All they can do is regurgitate. They can only function with what they have been told to say, and that through that social engineering. And they have been programmed to fear everything that is contrary to what they have been told. You're backsliding. You're subjecting yourself to eternal damnation, hellfire and brimstone. Even though it was Augustine of Hippo, also called Saint Augustine, that made that hell, fire, and brimstone into a physical thing. It wasn't that before him. So this becomes important today because critical thinking. I don't know if you've heard that Texas is trying to do something deceptive. They are trying to introduce the Bible into public school, K through 12, and they're not doing it under the form of religion because there's already case law. There's already decisions by the United States Supreme Court saying if you do it with Christianity, if you put Christianity into the church, you have to give equal time to other religions, including our belief system of paganism. But you have to give equal time. That's already been said. So what are they trying to do? They're trying to use it. They're trying to backdoor it, sneak it in there under a historical book. A historical book. Well, it's not true. It's if you want it's historical fiction, I don't agree with that either, because they are being deceptive. It's a religious book. What books do they want mandated into K through 12? And why? Well, first let's do the why. And it's because, remember that pop, boom, and that's shifting this way, and you're getting more people that are believing in the fulfillment or theology, and less people that are leaving the Zionist area because of the actions of Israel. Well, they have to make sure that the next generation is programmed to believe the Zionist perspective. Okay. Now, there is a saying, some people attribute it to Abraham Lincoln. Whatever it is a good saying. It is an accurate saying. And it is, the philosophy of the classroom in this generation will be the philosophy of government in the next generation. Think about that. What our children are socially engineered with, once they get to be adults, they will vote for. They will choose to be their masters based on that social engineering. And if that is slipping, and people are starting to see the puppet master, then they have to make sure that is re-implemented into the minds of the next generation so that doesn't go away. So what stories, what fictional stories do they want said to these students K through 12? Well, one of them is the Good Samaritan story. Another one is Daniel in the Lion's Den. Now, I haven't discussed Daniel in the Lion's Den, so I'm going to on this video. And the other one is another one. There was more. These are just the three that I wrote down. Is Jonah in the Whale. Now, I've shown Jonah in the Whale and where that all comes from, and it's a fabrication. It's not a real story. It's all fictional myth. So I'll get into Jonah or David in the Lion's Den momentarily. But what they have to do is they have to henpeck. They have to henpeck their stories. In typical Christian fashion, they have to henpeck their stories. So they're not going to tell you of the divine command for slavery that they gave themselves. They're not going to tell you of the divine command that they gave themselves for pedophilia or child sex trafficking or murder. Well, remember when I talked about adultery before in my reply to the one about the victimless crimes? Do you know that it's in the Bible that if a man and a woman are caught in the act of adultery, the woman is killed? The woman is killed, not the man. So that's morals from the Bible, right? Okay. Also, let's look at the goddess. So they're going to tell the stories about the goddess and how chaotic, evil, destructive God of Abraham, every time any of his followers returned to worship the goddess up in the groves, which I've already spoken in previous videos what those groves were, the high places, the areas of, well, one of the groves, the global globe, is the Taiga biome, but the high peaks have these groves, and you have the rocky way up high, and then you have the grove, that yew dale area of fir trees, and then you go down into the white birch trees and then the other deciduous trees. Those were your groves. Every single time that you had people going up into those groves to worship the goddess, God destroyed those people and all of those areas. And he commanded that the church, and the church did it because they gave themselves that divine command, to destroy those groves, to destroy nature. So read into that. Think critically, because the Bible then acknowledges the feminine, divine feminine, is a reality. So, another area. the deception of David and Uriah so he could end up with Bathsheba taking a bath on a rooftop. David saw her. What did he do? Sheba was married to Uriah, and David was at war and sent Uriah to the front lines to be killed. So then that way Bathsheba would be a widow and he could boink her. So just one of the areas that, these are some of the areas that Texas is eliminating. They've henpecked their stories. So David and the Lion's Den. Let's start with an autumn sky chart here. And before I go into this, I got to upload some other ones here. I got to do winter. Let me get my winter one in there. And let me get my spring one in here. Because this is important to see where they took David and the Lion's Den from. So we're looking at the autumn sky chart right here. So in this story, David is Orion, and you'll see him over there in the side of the screen labeled as number 2, because the God of Abraham demands bloodshed, blood on the altar of Abraham. It's throughout the Bible, and if you look at modern day Israel, that is what they do. If you look at modern day Christianity in America, name me a time when we haven't been involved in a war. Everybody wants to say Iran can't have nukes, but there's only one country in the world that has destroyed millions of people by using a nuclear weapon. But that was to stop Satan on earth. That's right. Okay. So there we have David, number 2, entering the Lion's Den. How do we know that's the Lion's Den? Well, because we go to the winter sky chart, and there we see number 5. Number 5 is the lion, and David, number 9, is crossing the Lion's Den, the overhead sky, the nighttime sky during winter. Number 5, the lion. Number 9, David. Boom. And then what do we see on the spring chart? We see, there goes David, number 12. On the other side, there's the lion, number 8. David is escaping the Lion's Den. Oh, it's a miracle. Look at David go. Oh, he was blessed by the God of the Bible. And that is the whole story behind David and the Lion's Den. There's nothing more to it. It's the programmed mind, the socially engineered mind that believes that David in the Lion's Den is real. So Christianity is an enslaved mind. It is Christianity in itself is a social construct put in place to empower the church and the government that the church supports. That's all it is. And until those binds, those shackles are broken, the Christian will always be enslaved. The mind will always be in that cage. And there will always be kneeling before a leader, whether it's a pseudo leader, like is in the picture, a fabrication, because Jesus is fake, or whether that programs them, that constructs them, engineers them to kneel before anyone, to subjugate themselves before anyone. So until next time, or Tils nästa gång. Good health, sir.